Welcome back to the sculpture, guys. This is the Hulk sculpture, and I'm going to finalize some of the details. Now that the structure is done, I can start adding where the muscle groups are. Because this is water-based clay, the extremities actually dry out faster than the torso because there's less clay, so you have to keep that in mind while you're sculpting. I'm adding a little bit of the anatomy, adding tendons, muscle groups, and one of the nicest things I have are bristle brushes that I've used for oil painting, and they're very stiff, and that helps out the sculpture quite a bit because you can use it to blend the clay together. The best tools are really wooden tools because they're stiff. And in a previous video, I showed you how to make your own wooden tools. I slowly add the clay and then I use a wooden tool to sculpt and model the clay. So this section might be a little bit difficult for you guys to see, but I am cutting a hole in the torso because I plan on firing this in the kiln. Remember, there is no armature inside. It's basically being supported by a pipe that I eventually will remove, but I want to make it hollow inside. So this entire torso shape is going to be hollow. And I take a scooping tool and I scoop out all the innards, and then I'll make another hole, say at the thigh, and then at the legs, and then at the arms and shoulders, and I link it all together. So that hole is going to be all connected, and then it's going to be vented towards the base of the sculpture. It's going to make it lighter, it's going to make it in such a way that when you put it in a kiln, the gases for the clay will be able to escape through the bottom. A couple of people suggested that I just cut the sculpture in half, but the reason I don't do that is because I don't want the structure to be modified. At this point, I just want it to be one unit. I don't want to join anything together. One thing I am considering is removing the arms for firing, but at this point, I think it's easier making these holes, even though they're very ugly midway like this. They're very easy to cover up. You spray the water clay, you get it nice and wet, and just add a top coat of very wet clay on top, and that's pretty much all you have to do. As long as the clay that you're adding it to is wet enough, it's going to be very easy to adhere, and it shouldn't have a lot of cracks when you fire it. You might not be aware, but in a clay structure like this, you need some sort of support. Usually in classical sculptures, you would have drapery, but I don't think Hulk needs any drapery. So one of the suggestions from Mark was adding a 1968 Land Rover, and at first I didn't think it could work, but I think I decided that I could make it work as long as it's not the entire car, because I already had the feet planted and I didn't want to elevate the feet and change the pose. So this is the front of the Land Rover, and it's a very distinct looking car, and I don't know much about them because you don't see them here in the Washington DC area, but in the back it's going to have the Land Rover front, and it also adds a little bit more interest to the backside. The front is going to have the tire, so this car usually has a spare tire on the front hood, which looks really cool, so I'm going to add that. And then you can imagine perhaps that the car is cut in half or has some sort of damage. At a certain point, I was thinking about sculpting a fire hydrant in there for some reason. I thought it would look kind of cool, but I'm not sure just yet. So adding some of the details of the tire, it's not perfect, but in a way I kind of like that. I like to have less detail towards the periphery of sculptures. I don't want to draw too much attention to the other stuff. I want your eyes to focus mostly on the Hulk and not in the Land Rover. So adding a little bit more detail, the thread of the tire, it's going to add a little bit more interest to the sculpture, but I'm not trying to be overly correct with these things. And also, I don't mind that it's distorted because if Hulk damaged it or it's some sort of ruin, it's kind of cool to have a wheel that's a little bit distorted. So the vascular section of the Hulk body, I'm probably going to add for the ending. This is a little bit of an early stage of detail making. I also want to add a few more details to the lower leg. Every single strand of the muscles on the Hulk are going to be shredded. And the interesting thing is that all the anatomy is there from a regular human. You just have to completely exaggerate. And in a way, that exaggeration makes it easier to sculpt because you don't have to be as precise. If you were to sculpt a human being, you would have to be extremely precise because there's a lot more subtlety to the human body. But the Hulk, all the muscles are tensioned. So you can always add more and it doesn't seem like it's out of place. So I'm still having a section under the arm that I have clay in there. And the reason I have the clay in there is because if I leave that open, that right arm is going to dry out completely and extremely fast, and it might break off. So that's probably one of the last things I'm going to be removing, along with the armature kind of like supporting the back. The drop cloth that I'm using works really well. The old masters used to use burlap, but shop towels work really well and they're very inexpensive. So at this point, I am midway on the Incredible Hulk sculpture. I really appreciate you guys watching. If you like the content, make sure you hit that like. If you don't like it, hit the dislike button. And if you're a new viewer, hit that subscribe button. It really helps out the channel. And I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.